we know it works, and we know it doesn't just work the day we walk off, that we know it works into the future, so well into the future. We put a 6-year no maintenance warranty on the system, which basically says don't do anything to it for 6 years, and if it clogs at any point, we'll come back and clean it. And we're so confident about it that we're not going to hit that issue. We're not going to clog, that we stand behind the product. Like most stormwater, like you can't get a contractor to warranty it the day he walks off the site. Like he finishes his punch list, he's gone. Like in the wind, there is no warranty on it. PaveDrain, we've built a better product so well that we can stand behind it. So as long as it's built to our spec, we come through. Like our goal is not to like sit there and be like, aha, you forgot this one little detail. Like, no. But if you go through it, you do it the right way, it will last.
Hey there, welcome to the Stormwater World Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to a new episode of the Stormwater World Podcast. Today we're going to talk innovation, but not the normal way that you're used to hearing it, because we talk a lot about innovation. We're actually going to talk about whether or not your processes in stormwater are kind of stagnant, or if you're just doing the same thing because it's the same thing, and whether or not you're just, do you have the ability to innovate within your company? Are you allowed to do that? Do you have that kind of culture? And with me today is Dr. Aaron Fisher. Dr. Fisher has a PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Maryland and a BS in chemistry from Duke University. He is currently the Vice President of Business Development for Ernest Maier, a family-owned company. Dr. Fisher is responsible for PaveDrain, a heavy-duty, low-maintenance permeable paver, which they manufacture, and fiberglass rebar, a stronger, more sustainable, corrosion-proof alternative to steel rebar. Dr. Fisher has a deep technical background in all aspects of sustainability. He has served as a contractor to several programmatic offices within the U.S. Department of Energy, Energy Efficiency, and Renewable Energy Office. He has also led the innovation program at Water Research Foundation on behalf of wastewater, stormwater, and drinking water utilities across the United States. And for the next 45 minutes, I get to just call him Aaron. Aaron, thanks for being on the pod. That was a lot. How are you today?
Thanks, Ty. Appreciate you having me on. And the bio's a little bit, but hopefully I don't have too many titles that explains what I do, and so folks know why they call me, because that's usually when people call me, I always have to figure out what do you know me from? What kind of trouble am I in? What do I need? What hat do I need to wear today?
Yeah. In fact, let's just boil it down. You guys are a manufacturer, and one of the very many things you manufacture is PaveDrain, and the other is that fiberglass rebar. And we'll probably talk about both during the course of this conversation. But let's jump in. I think we've got a few bullet points to start off. It's permission to innovate. And I think it's an interesting topic, and I think we can go in a lot of different directions. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, innovation is one of those keywords that you get into management and you just like to throw around. You're like, all right, we've got a problem. Our existing strategies don't quite work. We need something new. We're just going to call that innovation. And so that's a lot. So management loves the idea because it's like, all right, we're gonna solve the same problems, we're gonna save some money, we're gonna do all these things, and so they talk about innovation, and they put it in their strategic plan, they put it in their values, but it's not always as simple as just saying I like innovation. Like there's a certain kind of person that like looks at something and says it needs to be better, and there's a lot of people that just look at it and go, that's great, like that's it, I don't need to adjust it. Like think about your favorite restaurant, like they have a great sandwich, you're like, that's it. Like, I don't touch it. Don't add any mayonnaise to that. Like, don't do anything to it. Right. Like, and then there's some people like, it's good, but it's missing like 2%. Like, let's throw some aioli on here. Like, I hear you mayo, but let's throw. And it's like it just takes a little bit of a different person that you're wired differently. And granted, you don't always want to be like looking at things and trying to innovate everything. Like, oftentimes you don't look at a toilet and be like, I think I could do that better. Like, you're just like, it works. The poo's gone, we're great. Like let's celebrate, let's move on with our lives. But there are certainly people who look at a toilet and go, I think we could do this better. Like I think we could use less water. I think we could make it less smelly. I think we could, but that's not everybody. And so when you get into corporate, like you got to have the management likes to give permission to innovate, but it's not always as simple as just saying like, here's your permission slip to innovate. It requires a real conscious shift from here's what we've always done to we're going to try some different things. And it's okay if we don't succeed as long as we learn things. And managers aren't always ready to do that, particularly middle management, who ultimately. A lot of your innovation is going to come from your rank and file. Like they look at ideas and they just go, "There's got to be a better way to do this. There's got to be a better mousetrap," and they kind of noodle on it. But middle managers generally got where they were by not rocking the boat.
Right.
And if that's how they got there, they're going to not rock the boat. And that's really the disconnect between a CEO that says, I see what innovation could do for us. Your rank and file go, we can certainly do this better. We can save a little bit of money. And your middle managers that are like, don't rock the boat, just get your bonus. Don't rock the boat, just get your bonus. And when you have that barrier between the people who want to promote innovation and the people who could actually innovate, it's a disconnect, and it never comes to fruition the way I think most managers think it should.
Well, and I think there's also the fear and monetary, right? Like you say, it could say, but I think initially all innovation costs money, right? It costs money it costs time, right? Like, so if I had a, so to take, pave drain, for example, if I just did a detention pond on one project, then I could just do it on the next project if it's anywhere similar, because I just don't have to think about it. That saves all this time, but I can bill the same amount through a project, and I don't, and then there's the fear, right? And so you can speak on that too, like, because if it worked last time, well, let's just say it worked, quote unquote, right? If it's, done properly, put in properly, maintained properly, and all those things, but I don't get in trouble. Right, but if I stop and I take and look and like, oh, okay, let me downsize this footprint with the use of the paved drain system or whatever, that's taking longer, and then there's potential for things to go wrong. Do you feel like that there's that fear that also inhibits people from innovating, which also I think kind of leads into our next topic, which is culture. So.
Yeah, fear is a real powerful motivator for folks. I don't want something to happen, like the avoidance of something. We were talking before, the Office Space movie. And the main character, like when they go through their management study and he says, they're interviewing him and he goes, so what's your motivation? He goes, well, I have 7 managers, so I don't really want to get yelled at 7 times for screwing up. So he's like, so I just don't screw up. So if I don't do anything, then I don't screw up. And if I don't screw up, I don't get yelled at and I have a great day. And you go, but then you realize what happens is now he's not doing anything. And so it's the fear of getting yelled at. And certainly in regulations, stormwater regulations and stormwater and like just engineering in general, I've done this before. It worked. And it worked well enough that like I don't hear any complaints. So if I do this again, I'm not going to get complained at. I'll be able to cash my paycheck. I won't get yelled at, and we'll go on. And that's, I would say, a good chunk of engineering professionals are in that vein now. Now it isn't to say that they all started there. It isn't to say they spend their whole career there. But a lot of them are like they get in a groove, I would say, and then they just kind of go with that. But it's really tough to tell the difference between a groove and a rut. And that's, I think, what a lot of people don't look at is when does a groove become a rut versus that's just what we do? And I mean, how does that come to fruition? Like we've all seen specs where I'm looking at a spec and I'm dealing with specs that date to like the 90s, like 2000s, and you're like, are we certain that's the right way to approach these calculations, or let alone like here's an example we see in stormwater all the time: the USDA soil maps. The USDA soil maps are from the 60s. They have a precision that is beyond what we do with GPS today. And you go, but nobody gets yelled at for using the USDA soil maps, so we're just going to keep doing that, even if they're not even remotely close to what we're seeing, because how in the 60s were we knowledgeable enough to know, yeah, right here, this is sea soil, and 2 feet away, that's D soil. And you're like, this is some guy's farm. Like, how did we understand? And that's, but nobody's ever been yelled at for using the USDA soil map. So nobody's thought that like there's a problem there until you get into an argument where it really does matter, where like, look, we're looking at an order of maybe 100 feet by 100 feet, and the precision there makes a huge difference in terms of what stormwater BMPs are even available to you because of soil infiltration rates.
Gotcha. Yep. And then what are you guys doing, or if you have any specifics, or just maybe as far as that permission to innovate, what are you guys doing on your end that you could point to that's making those middle managers a little easing their mind a little bit, so that, again, and I think we're going into our next topic, is kind of culture and organizational inertia, so you can kind of run with it there, but I think that's obviously going to be part of it. But what are you all doing to implement a solution to that fear to innovate?
Well, I think, if the question is about Ernest Maier, I mean, we don't have a lot of middle management to both our, I mean, there's a very flat architecture, which helps a little bit. But I think really it's a lot of people are aligned with the bottom line. If our goal is to make money, anything that either makes us more money or saves or costs us less money ultimately accomplishes that goal. And so when you have a single motivating principle, there's a lot more open-ended how you get to it. And I think that's kind of it. And so jokingly, our CEO, when you ask him what's his strategic plan, he goes, I have no strategic plan. Like, my plan is to have no plan. It's like to take advantage of these opportunities, which sometimes gives, I mean, I can tell you my ops guys get a little heartburn on that one because they know what they're roughly doing. I mean, they're taking material from our yard to the job site. Like, it's pretty clear what they need to do and how many trucks they need and stuff like that. But then there's, I mean, in the same vein, you can also have sales guys who are like, I look at a product class, and this is where fiberglass rebar came from, is we didn't have it 2 years ago. Nobody had it 2 years ago. I looked at the product and just said, all right, let me understand what, like, I'm aware of it, but let's see what the profit, let's see what the price looks like. Let's see what the codes look like around it. We did some kind of deep dive on it, understood it was lower cost than steel. It outperformed steel in terms of tensile strength, in terms of corrosion, all these kind of things. It was coming into code, and the real barrier to its entry was people just didn't know about it. You would talk to somebody, and I'm sure most folks here, if I said something, they're just not aware of it. And so, but we're like, all right, there's clearly an opportunity here. If we can sell this product, we don't sell 100% of the steel market. We can pull people from the steel rebar market over to the fiberglass market. We'll make some more money selling this. That seems to make sense. And so we've obviously learned a lot in terms of how to implement, how to speak to the customer, how to sell it. I mean, but 2 years on, like, it took us about a year to move our first truckload of the product. Then it took us 6 months to move the second. It took us 3 months to move the third. And this year we've taken in like almost 4 truckloads now at this point. And it's just, we've understood how to do this. And the reason why we're doing this is we're trying to sell a product category that we've never sold before. And we're innovating, and we didn't have a plan for this. Like the strategic meeting 3 years ago, there was nobody saying, you know what, we really need an alternative rebar here. Like, nobody was looking for that. So you just kind of see what comes to you, and then you learn to take advantage of it. And that's tough because you have to have a culture that allows for that. You have to have people with bandwidth that look at something and go, we can do it better. And then they have to be in positions that allow them to do just that. And so fortunately, I've been in one of the, I sought that out, but I mean, the CEO's feedback to me when he hired me was, he's like, I could poach anybody I want, but I'm going to have the same outcomes as everybody else and all my competitors, or I could find somebody else that's off the wall and roll the dice, and either it'll be
you. Wait, was that you?
Yeah, he's like,
let me make sure I'm with you. I'm tracking. Like, oh, okay. I know, I've met him, and so I could hear him saying that.
Yeah, and he goes, and he's like,
I spoke to him. I've talked to him before.
Yeah, Brent's a great guy, and he's just like, look, he's like, I could have the same. I know what I would get. Like, he's like, the range of outcomes with a competitor, hiring a competitor, or somebody who's worked in the space is going to be this. The range of outcomes from like a wild card is all over the map. And he's like, look, I could hit really big, or I could hit, or it could be really small. And he's like, look, but I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that those bad outcomes, like this person looks like they'll work. Like, you don't need to motivate them, and they do these things, and that's it. Because my background in a nonprofit doesn't necessarily say like this guy wants to sell stuff. Like, nonprofits are do-gooders, and I'm like, but in my world, I'm of the mind where if I'm not selling something, then I'm being sold, and And that's a weird nonprofit mindset. But again, it doesn't have to be sleazy. I'm not a used car guy. I was selling better innovation for water utilities. Like, I was there because I believed we could do better by our customers, by our ratepayers, by our citizens in water and wastewater and stormwater. And then they just didn't understand that, and that's why I left. But I mean, in coming over here, it's like, look, that same mindset translated across, and I mean, that's the innovation mindset and the culture that helps. It helps push these ideas into practice.
I agree, and I think some of the things you said are key for your all's organization is, one, that you don't have a lot of layers, and so it allows you to move a lot faster than other organizations, and two, it's coming from the top down. So like, you have these companies, and we were talking pre-call about, innovation being part of the vision statement, but then all these middle managers, they feel they're afraid, right? And so why is that? And that does go back to the culture of the organization. Whereas, you just said it, like, Brennan could have just picked, the same old, and he said, no, let me go get this other guy, because he's going to bring fresh ideas and he's going to allow us to innovate. So kudos to you on that. But that kind of sums up what we're talking about, is just that, permission to innovate actually not being just a word on the wall, but actually being done. And that you guys are doing just that. I'd like to back up a minute. Actually, I'm not familiar with that rebar product, and you kind of went fast, and it was kind of within that other context. Could you just kind of fill me in, like, what is it? What does it specifically do? What are some uses within stormwater? So the listeners, because we always do, we're going to link how to get hold of you and all that stuff. So you've got links to that product or information about that product or case studies. We can include all that in the show notes. But if you would just speak directly to that product, I'd like to know more.
Yeah, this is. I've done actually a podcast in the concrete world on this one. Okay, so
we can link to that podcast too. That's fine.
But for the stormwater folks, I mean, I'll pull it into a really simple level. You mentioned we manufacture. We do not manufacture. We distribute a product from a company called MST Bar. They're called Maximum Strength Bar.
Gotcha.
It's fine. I mean, everybody thinks I'm an employee there too. Like, they treat me like I'm an employee over there. They're like, dude, you know this product better than just about everybody else. Like, you don't halfway do something. But what it is, so rebar is in concrete because concrete is great under compression, terrible under tension, about 1/10 as strong. So when we report like 3,000 PSI concrete, it's about 1/10 as strong under tension. So it's much easier to pull apart. So what we've done with concrete is we've added a second material into it, kind of make a composite, two materials that adds tensile strength, and that's been steel rebar for 100 plus years. It's a great tensile strength material, and then now you have a material in your reinforced concrete that's great under tension and compression. That's where we've been for 100 years, but one of the big struggles with concrete is the corrosion that occurs, the lifetime of our concrete, and it's not really that concrete doesn't last, it's the reinforcement that doesn't last. So think about Roman concrete. Everybody's always like, why are the aqueducts still standing? And there's a new report every 6 months from a professor about it. But really what it is they didn't put steel in their concrete. And by not putting steel in their concrete, they did not have to deal with corrosion. And ultimately the corrosion wants to happen. The iron wants to turn into rust. It actually grows in volume and then ultimately cracks the concrete. And then once the concrete starts cracking, the structural strength is gone. Well, in talking to stormwater folks, obviously we deal a lot with water. Most of our concrete is there because we're trying to contain water in some way or channel it or do something. So certainly corrosion is a very big deal on this side. Well, how do you get rid of corrosion? To date, the ideas around steel have been either you put the rebar further into your concrete so that it's further away from the surface so it takes the water longer to get there, or you coat your steel or use some kind of like stainless steel. But all of those things drive up price or decrease performance. And there really hadn't been much of an option until very recently with fiberglass rebar that had kind of come along as an academic curiosity for about 50 years. And then as we've kind of got into scale, as we've learned how to make glass fibers for like fiber optic cables and things like that, the pricing has really decreased. And so pricing has come from steel, like fiberglass was some novelty that's really expensive that had some niche applications, to it is just lower cost than steel now. I can sell it at my retail store at about a 30% discount over steel. Same performance, things like that. What we've also seen is knowledge around how the product works, because it's not exactly the same product. It's very similar, but not the same. DOTs heard about this. Corrosion costs them a lot of money. Obviously, bridges, walls, seawalls, all those kind of things DOTs are handling. But we're also touching in the stormwater space. But they needed something that didn't corrode, so they've tried it out. They basically have done some studies that they began in the early 2000s. And long story short, those structures of the first generation of bars are going to last 100 years, which is, I mean, most rebar, we're building a structure to last 30 years before a major rehab. On a bridge side, I mean, stormwater, some water-facing stuff like seawalls, like you're lucky to get 5 years out of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about this stuff, it's just one of these components that if you're not looking for it, you're not seeing. So it's corrosion-free, it's cost competitive or often cheaper than steel. In terms of site access and weight, it weighs a lot less. It's about a quarter the weight. So getting out to remote sites, carrying it is very good. When you build on poor soil, you don't have to have quite the same footing because it's just not the same dead load going through it. And so that's really what we've seen. And so we've seen codes change to reflect this. Obviously, there's a product like this sounds really great. So now it needs to come into code, and this is where the engineers come in, where they know how to innovate. They can do the calculations, but code is very comforting to them. And so in the last 5 to 10 years, the codes have changed. So ACI 318, which is the general concrete construction code, has had that. The residential code has embraced it. So it's now code by reference. In Canada, the stormwater and wastewater folks actually have it in their environmental engineering code. I would imagine the US code is going to come along pretty quickly behind that as well. But simply put, if you're looking at building a stormwater structure and you're not considering this, you're overlooking it, because if you're going to build it, you've already gotten into your BMP, you've made the selection, you've gotten through design. Now it's a question, how long will it last for my customer before a major maintenance and rehab? And nobody's really thinking about, they're thinking about cleaning filters, they're thinking about cleaning drains, they're thinking about maintaining the green infrastructure. But guess what, if your concrete caisson just cracks, like suddenly now, it doesn't matter all those fluid dynamics, those hydrodynamic calculations you've done, they're not relevant anymore. So just make your concrete last longer, but then also make it cost less. And I think that's the other thing too. I get out in the field with laborers all the time and I go, hey, do you want to carry the heavy stuff or the light stuff? And I mean, shocker, they all point at the light stuff. And I go, this is it. Like, it's in code. I do a lot of education. So this is a product that interests you. I mean, I'm more than happy to educate. It's available nationally. Ernest Maier does not, but MST Bar has national distribution. I mean, it's actually something until Home Depot sells a competing product under the brand name like Pink Bar. I mean, it's all there. So it's something you can see. It's just, again, if you weren't looking for it, this goes back to innovation. If you weren't looking for it, you're not going to find it.
Right.
You miss 100% of the shots you never take kind of combat. So there you go.
Are any of the big players in concrete fab within stormwater, are they using it? Is it already being offered within their structures, or do we know?
Some of them are and some of them aren't. I mean, we've actually turned a very reliable concrete construction company in the area they're doing a lot of stormwater infrastructure. They do a lot of site civil work, and they have flipped every project they can to us because it costs them less, it saves them money. I mean, and they're like, and I literally talked to the CEO. I go, I wish you would tell somebody else about this. He goes, I'm not making my competitors smarter. I'm like, oh, geez. And that's kind of it. I mean, but what we see is that in markets like this, somebody makes the switch. Actually, this is what happened in Pittsburgh in their poured foundation market. Somebody made the switch, realized they started winning every bid, and Pittsburgh loves money more than they like steel, and that market flipped over, and that's what we're seeing. But we're seeing kind of on a piecemeal basis at the moment. Obviously, I'd love to see it in a much more coherent way, because again, like if we're going to build our stormwater infrastructure, our storms are only going to get bigger. And the nice part about when I talk and sell stormwater, I usually go to customers and I go, every little bit you do is generally additive. Well, it's additive as long as those structures are still working, those BMPs are still working. And no one's thinking about how, like, well, if my bioretention broke and cracked, like suddenly it's just soil now. And that's, I think, where it is that if you get people to think a little bit longer term, you get them to value things like this, they already know it, but you just got to give them permission to make the switch. And I think that ultimately comes back to the innovation is they don't have, no one's going to get fired for buying steel rebar, but there's a lot of times that like, look, you should, but if you don't promote somebody for making this kind of switch for saving you a little bit of money, then you're really missing out. And there's a lot of cultures that, I mean, how many times I show somebody the two products and the guy goes, I'll take what my dad had. You go, okay.
Yep. I think like anybody that's having to fight it from the municipal side, you should always kind of push your engineering to even if it's within the city or your external engineers you're working with. I think you should always just kind of question and make sure that. But everybody's so busy. I get it. Blah blah blah. But hey, there's so much stuff out there. I remember in my former life, I had asked one of our senior engineers because he had a brochure on his desk from a XYZ company. I was like, well, why do you use them? What's great about what they've got? And he was like, oh, they came by, we're going to use it, whatever. Like there wasn't any research that had really truly been done. I'm like, well, I'm going to all these conferences. I can bring you 4 competing products back and you can figure out which one's best if you want. He goes, well, I can call this, so if you're out there, if you're a rep, then you should go see people because, a lot of people just go with who they know, right? To get relationship business. But I definitely agree that, that the innovation is key to, and like for your all situation with that rebar, for improving the bottom line, that's amazing. So kudos to you on that. And we wouldn't want to not talk about pave drain, right? So I mentioned it in your bio. You're responsible for those 2 products. Sometimes I feel like everybody knows what pave drain is, but at the same time, I know that's not true because, and I won't steal your thunder. You can talk way more about pave drain than I can, although I feel like I know that product pretty well. But go ahead, and since we talked about the rebar, do you want to kind of touch on, pave drain and its differences in the market and what it can do for innovation?
Yeah, certainly this is another innovative product that oftentimes we answer for the sins of what's come before us. But in short, it's a heavy-duty, low-maintenance permeable pavement, and I usually sequence it for most people. I say it's a second-generation system. And what I mean by a second-generation system is most permeable pavement products that people are familiar with are pavement products that we poked holes in to make them permeable, which is great in theory, but in practice, those little holes are what clogs really quickly. That's what everybody swears off. They're like, I hate permeable pavement because I don't want to do the maintenance. I was literally at a meeting where a town manager was like, I will maintain every BMP except permeable pavement. I go, I get it. I understand it. And I have a nice story about that. I'll get back to it. But where pave drain is different is that instead of beginning as a pavement system, it began as a permeable erosion control product that we then turned into a pavement system. So instead of being a forced marriage with water, it's a product that works with water first. And I just got to convince you it takes traffic loading. And concrete is a great product to convince you with that because compressive forces, as we talked about at the beginning of the rebar, it's easy to have compressive forces as long as you have the ability to spread out that weight. And we've done a lot in terms of design and engineering to make sure that when you have a point load, that weight is distributed by the proper use of geosynthetics and geofabrics through the product. And so while we get to the same point of having a pavement system that's permeable, the actual field use is very different, not the day of, but like 2 weeks into the future. We were working with DC Water actually on their Green Alleyway program, and they've been using traditional permeable interlocking concrete pavers for years and years, and they're like, the only reason it works is because we have a drain structure in the middle. And you're like, that's cheating. Like, that's not what the whole point of this is. But they just have a nice drain in the middle, all the water goes into the drain, and then they're like, it worked. And you're like, that's not what we were trying to do. But they did 2 alleyways at the same time, one with pave drain, one with traditional pavers. 2 weeks after install, that paver system was clogged. Like, you could see rings of debris. You could see that the ponding was happening on the surface, and you go, that's a problem. That those holes are already clogged. Versus in a system that's pre-clogged. Versus pave drain, we came back 3 months. We've come back at 6 months. The system looks like the day we installed it. And you go, that's the difference. Is you want to put in a system and then leave it alone, because people just forget about it. It's a road. They don't think too much of it. And the more they have to maintain it, the more problems that is for them. And so that's really where PageRain's distinguished itself. And I don't know how much Doug has talked about it, but I mean, one of the reasons we've come back to people is we've said, we know it works. And we know it doesn't just work the day we walk off, that we know it works into the future, so well into the future. We put a 6-year no maintenance warranty on the system, which basically says, don't do anything to it for 6 years. And if it clogs at any point, we'll come back and clean it. And we're so confident about it that we're not going to hit that issue. We're not going to clog, that we stand behind the product. Like most stormwater, like you can't get a contractor to warranty it the day he walks off the site. Like he finishes his punch list, he's gone. Like in the wind, there is no warranty on it. PageRain, we've built a better product so well that we can stand behind it. So as long as it's built to our spec, we come through. Like our goal is not to like sit there and be like, aha, you forgot this one little detail. Like, no. But if you go through it, you do it the right way, it will last. And we've had systems that have been in for a dozen plus years that have never been cleaned. And that speaks to, this is a system that works versus a system that clogs in 2 weeks, 3 weeks after install. And so that's really where it's distinguished itself, is it's a better mousetrap. And so unless you were like, and again, we get back to an engineer, like a lot of jurisdictions treat us the same as everybody else. They treat us the same as the generation 1 of permeable pavement. And guess what? Now you're just looking at price, and everything seems the same. And so we may not win right out of the gate on price. And guess what? The engineer doesn't really know how to distinguish sometimes. So he's like, I'm not really, why would I try this premium branded product? And we're like, and then we go to an engineer, and then for every one of those engineers, we have another engineer that goes, look, I understand the difference between generation 1 and generation 2, and nothing from generation 1 works. Yours works. I'm not letting the contractor specify anything else. And certainly we've seen competitors now step in, because guess what? Our system works, but it's not as proprietary as maybe we'd like it to be. But guess what? Having competitors, imitators, is the highest form of flattery. And we're starting to see a lot of that, where there are competitors who, they make the same recognition, start with a permeable system that works, an erosion control system, and then turn it into a pavement system. And you've got a product. And I mean, look, as much as I know, we figured it out. We understand the sales support and everything else that comes in there with the relationship and all that. We've got it at PageRain. But look, I understand how municipalities work, is they need 3 bids. and unfortunately, we can only offer one of the 3. And so it helps us now that we're seeing this kind of change. And certainly everybody else is not seeing it the same way. But I mean, we're starting to see a lot more people recognize, this is what I was trying to accomplish. I was trying to address water quantity and water quality. You guys did it. And oftentimes we can document it. So Chris Foley and P4 Infrastructure, they can put real-time sensors in it. We can show you that it's working and stand behind it with actual data. And then ultimately, we've got in a lot of jurisdictions to come around and go, they look at the case studies and they go, well, you guys aren't lying. Like, but we can't alter our design manual. Like, and this is the permission to innovate problem. Like, we can't alter our design manual, but we can't ignore what you guys are showing us and the fact people want to do it. So they're kind of like giving us this little like gray area to bless us until they can come back and adjust their design manual to say, you're not, like Gen 1 and Gen 2 are so different that they really do need to be distinctive products. And that's what we're seeing. And so that's PageRain in a nutshell. And I think we're starting to see a lot of momentum, because the difference between it works and it doesn't work is kind of binary. And most people are now getting that we're not sitting there arguing with them being like, well, you didn't do the maintenance. You did it at 3 months and 2 days. If you'd done it at 3 months minus, then you'd be okay. It's not that. This is a system that's designed to work the way it's supposed to in the field. The tolerances, the engineering is all overkill. Certainly, it sometimes makes it's not always the easiest to sell over engineering, but like, look, an engineer, like, we don't have complaints and callbacks, because look, the product works. We get out in the field, we support it. We understand when it doesn't work. Usually it's our next they go. It's not the contractor. I was with a contractor about a year and a half ago who built on frozen ground. And I go, look, it's an easy point and fix. Like, you never build on frozen ground. Like, we understand what happened there. But we got back out there with the site, worked with the contractor, and now those pictures from that job site are in our manual, not under the what not to do section, but in here's how it should look when it's done. Nice. And I think that speaks to we understand what it is. We're going to get out there. We're going to get it right, and you're going to get the performance that you expect, which is great for a jurisdiction. Like you can either do stormwater to check a box, or you can do stormwater because you actually want to address flooding and water quality and water quantity issues. And if that's the category you're in, we work, and that's really it.
And it comes back to that so many times. We say that a lot on the pod about checking boxes, whether or not just the fact that the technology exists out there to be able to prove that I'm doing it. I'm making that difference. Like I can show with an infiltrator and that the amount of water I'm infiltrating back into the ground to get back to that zero line basis of what it was like before it was built, and just all the data, just everything, just in a big nutshell. I mean, I just don't know. I would die on that hill if I worked for a municipality. I would just be like, no, man, if I'm going to be held, if I have to if my goal is to improve water quality for our watershed, then I'm going to push for any product that I could actually prove that we're doing it, to keep the regulators off of us, and just, so that I could say I did my job. But to bring it back, to the innovation side, I think innovation, a lot of times, like just the word innovation, just general, outside of stormwater, innovation means new and untested. You bring it into stormwater and you say the word innovation, and you absolutely have to throw out your normal knee-jerk definition. Innovation in the stormwater world does not mean new and untested. So paved drain's been around for how many years? 20?
Yeah, we're probably just under 20. I'd say on the young side of 20.
So it's an innovative product that's been around for 20 years. You got to wrap your mind around that. So there is, like, you're not really jumping out there and taking a huge leap of faith, okay, people? And then this rebar product that you're talking about, the fiberglass rebar, it's when you were going through the history, it's been around for even longer than that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an academic curiosity for 50 years. I would say the Japanese have been doing it since the early 90s. So we've got 40, almost 35 years now at this point.
So
I mean, and they have bridges built. Bridge engineers are the golden children of structural engineering, and they don't do anything unless they're confident. They've been doing it for 20 at this point.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I come out of the utility space. I mean, most utilities would not consider implementing something unless it had 5 to 10 years worth of operational data at an operating facility, which then puts you in a catch-22, because how do you get into an operating facility for 5 to 10 years worth of data, like, unless you have previous 5 to 10 years worth of data? And that ultimately gets back to it, is that you don't get yelled at. I mean, and most utilities were like, look, here's how we handle our stormwater this is what it costs. All right, this is how many people I can charge it to. Let's divide that number by the number of people, and then we'll send out a bill. And unfortunately, we've kind of crossed that threshold of affordability where, like, people are like, my water's costing me a lot of money. Like, is there a way to save on it? And they're like, I'm going to go run to my local grocery store and buy bottles of water. But most people don't really fully understand how much water they use in a day. Like, a normal house I think it's around 100 gallons a day. Okay, now if you walk in and you bought 100 gallons and your neighbor bought 100 gallons, that's the whole water aisle's gone. Like, we're back to COVID. like this, but let alone before you get to the price point difference, like, people don't value it because the market signal from something that literally falls from the sky is very, very low, and all these things, versus something that is a premium product. Like, Fiji water is, I mean, it's a million times more expensive than your tap water. Is it a million times better? No, not really. It's pretty much the same stuff. But why? They put a label on it.
And it's in a plastic. And it's in a plastic bottle. Do we want to go down that rabbit hole?
Well, here's
is that a whole nother podcast?
Well, it is and it isn't. But here's the difference: is Fiji or Coca-Cola or whoever is willing to warranty the bottle to the point it hits your lips, which is the point that I, as the consumer, use it. A lot of times, your utility does not warranty the water. They only warranty the water the moment it leaves the plants. They don't care about the pipes. They don't care about the pipes.
Exactly.
And you go, so what is that confidence worth to people? And you go, that's worth a lot of, there's a lot there where, I mean, and I think that gets back to a lot of our approach with, like, page drain. It's like, we're going to get out in the field with you. We're going to work with you. We're going to see the drawings. We're going to get there, because ultimately when it doesn't work, it's going to be our name. But we'd rather spend a couple minutes up front and talk through why we're saying something and get out on the site for a moment than go through a bunch of contractor finger pointing at the end, like, nobody's getting any money there. We're just trying to get the owner happy at that point. That's of total cost to everybody involved. But if you can get to that level, you can make people comfortable. There's a real value in that. But I mean, sometimes people forget that they're sometimes looking for the lowest cost. And I mean, we're all guilty of buying something from Wish.com and it breaking 10 seconds later. Like, we're all guilty of that. We've all learned the lesson. Like, there's a point we'll pay for quality, and that's, I think, where value comes in. And sometimes it's really tough for people to see that, because everybody thinks everything's number 2 pencils and all number 2 pencils are the same until you get into space and you need your Fisher space pen or whatever you need up there.
Oh my gosh.
Or you're underwater, right? And something crazy.
So we had the final bullet point to kind of wrap into the the innovation, the cultural and organization, and then you had the reward systems. Did you want to touch on that, or how does that kind of wrap into what we've been talking about? Or we can go in a different direction and you can talk about just, I'm kind of curious on just entry, barrier to entry, how you guys are trying to get these products through, maybe thoughts that you have to encourage organizations, whether they be in the engineering, private engineering, or in the municipal world, like, what needs to happen to better be able to adopt these things faster?
Well, that's 2 very different thoughts.
Yeah. You can go with whichever one you want. I'll
do the rewards easier, because that one's an easy one to box up. To put it, I mean, so we talked about what is innovation, culture that kind of supports it, and then the actions really around that is the reward system. If you recognize people for innovating, regardless of whether the innovation was a success, that's rewarding. That's recognition for trying things. If you reward people for not causing problems, people recognize that. That's not innovation. That's just steady as she goes. And look, organizations can do that too, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you're going to promote innovation, you're going to have to recognize it. And innovation, for the sake of innovation, is not where I'm going. It's innovation to learn new things. It's sometimes you might just be like, the way we were doing it was right. Now we have more confidence in that. You might try something and it might fail, and you went through and that's it. Learning's like, we're not going to do that again. Okay, that could be pretty valuable, because oftentimes you see, let's just say, like, the herd mentality is big in business. Like, that pulling it back to innovation, maybe not doing it, you tried it and you understand why it doesn't work, is valuable. Not doing something, not wasting money, can be very valuable in a business, because, I mean, we've all tried stuff and it didn't work, but not doing something and knowing it's the right thing to not do is also valuable. So learning through that, and then the reward system is ultimately a reflection of that. Like, if you recognize employees, if you recognize your staff for doing these kind of things, they will continue to do them, and that is the way your business will develop. If you recognize the steady as she goes, we had 0 lost time accidents, they're going to focus on, we're going to have 0 lost time accidents. Don't run. We don't want to lose our bonus. Don't run too quickly. And you watch, your productivity might slip, but like, your safety might rise. And nice bow on that is to pay attention to that. What do you say? Who do you recognize? Ultimately will get you to a culture that does, if you want innovation, that's how you get it. Innovation is not the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it can help a lot of things. It can help you avoid a lot of things. You have a lot of resources inside most companies. Like, you have, every one of your employees is a different perspective, and more often than not, nobody's listening to them. So why are they even talking? I frequently tell my kids this. Just because you said something doesn't mean I heard what you said, or vice versa. Like, I say something because I want you to hear it, and vice versa. You say something because you want me to hear it. But just because I said something 20 times does not mean you heard it 20 times. So that disconnect is there. And so understanding that and recognizing that, I think, is a nice bow for innovation. There's a lot to be done. It's but it's not it's not its own panacea, so to speak. You can't just put a buzzword and buzzword solves the problem.
Right. Exactly. Innovation is not it should not be a buzzword within your company. It should be your actual culture.
Good summary.
Kind of a last thought. It'd be, you guys have momentum. Future looks bright. Do you feel like what's driving the momentum? Do you feel like people are aging out, retiring, so we're getting new people in, and so they're open to newer ideas, willing to take the risk, or is it more on the regulatory side, or what do you think is driving the momentum that you guys have, or is it may be different for different companies, but just from your perspective in the trenches that you're working within, what do you feel like is driving your momentum?
Perseverance, I would say.
It's too dumb to quit.
Yeah. It's too dumb to quit would explain that, like, we haven't seen the results, but we get the results, and you then go, look, this is the result that we're seeing. The positive results are not an aberration. Like, it is really coming. And people go, and I come in and I frequently go to people and I start my presentations, my lunch and learns. I go, I can either present this the way the world works or the way the regulatory body says the world works. Which one do you want? Because the divergence, so as an example, like, you look at run-on ratios. They say you can't have more than 3-to-1 run-on ratio or 5-to-1 run-on ratio. They pick some number, 1-to-1. You can't have any. And you go, great. The water gives 0 Fs what the regulator said.
Right, exactly.
And you go, I mean, how many times we see a situation where there's one that the Wisconsin Cudahy, it was supposed to be 5-to-1, it was 33-to-1. You go, great. I now have to deal with the 33-to-1. Like, I don't get to look at the water and go, sorry, bouncer here, you're going someplace else. And there's a lot of that we see with the soil types and stuff. And I go through that and we go, look, you look at the soil. It's not what we say it is. It's what it actually is what happens. And that's where the data and the pushback has come, is like, we're like, look, this is what really happens every single time. Like, this is not an aberration. Clay soil in Wisconsin is not different than clay in Maryland. And we came back, and every time you do a study like that, the first response is like, oh, it's great. That was Wisconsin clay. And you go, Midwest clay is legendary. What are you guys talking about? But they're like, no, it's not Maryland clay. So we did the study in Maryland. And we're like, it was even better. Like, here it is. Like, and you sit there with the data and you go, I can't be making this up. And you get to resonate with people who are like, look, my job here as a city manager, as a stormwater engineer, is to solve this problem. And the people who say, I need to solve this problem, I know where I am, I know where I need to be, and I'm not set on and I'm not following a rut or a groove between those 2 points. They start looking at it, and then you watch this, and then you watch their peers look at it, and they go, oh, that worked. And they work, and they're using, and then those firms that follow this new path have a competitive advantage. And they go, now you walk into a city manager and you go, I know what the other guy's going to propose to you. They're going to propose traditional Generation 1 permeable pavement, and we're going to propose this. This is why this works. This is actually going to be what you want, because I am not going to burden you with generations of maintenance. I am not going to make this challenging. And you watch how these city managers go, all right, they do it. And then what happens is the state regulators go, like, they go back to the state and they go, you can't ignore what I'm doing, and you can't tell me I'm wrong. And so then the state has to start opening everything up. But I mean, honestly, I'm in a conversation with a lot of state folks, and they're like, I don't need to talk to you. Like, our manual covers this. Like, and I'm like, it doesn't, because I had to fight tooth and nail to get any demos done. And it's like, and they're sitting there saying, like, your data works, but our manual is still the gold standard. And I go, the data and the manual don't agree. Yeah. Like, and that's the interesting recognition that you start to see from folks is the lights slowly come on. But again, most engineers, like, when they're presented with that, this path, the innovative pathway, is going to take time and effort, and potentially it's going to cost the client money. And unless they have to do it, there's no other way. They're like, that's not really an engineer. An engineer's job is to get and hold permits. The easiest way to get and hold permits is to follow this hand, which is just the manual. And that's, I think, the struggle, is that there's such that disconnect between an engineer's job is not to deliver the best design, it's to get and hold permits. And if you go 90% of engineers are getting and holding permits, now you understand kind of the thing is and that's why Doug jokes that PageRain is a 20-year overnight success, is that it's taken a while to look successful because we've been so perseverant on that end. And then ultimately you hit the right people, and there are a lot of do-gooders. They're not sitting there raising a flag. They don't walk around with a tag on their LinkedIn profile and say, I'm a do-gooder and I damn the torpedoes. Because the other side too is, I mean, a lot of us are that way, but it's not about the same things. I mean, so you have the guys who they might be engineers, but they do it in the sandwich world. Like they are sitting there working on their sandwiches and perfecting maybe their barbecue, and then you've got the engineers that'll do it in their daily job. But how do you find the engineer? Like, just because you're an engineer does not tell you whether you're a sandwich perfectionist or an engineering perfectionist. So full circle.
Yeah, not everybody has a sign. They don't. If they could just put it across their forehead, I am willing to buy new things. I got you. Well, hey, what's the best way to get in touch with you? We'll put links in the show notes. Is it just by your email? What if people want to reach out and have a further discussion? Your email is?
My email is afisher, AFISHER, at emcoblock.com. You can reach out on LinkedIn. It's probably the only social media I keep really active.
Okay.
So those two. Ty certainly knows me.
Yeah, you can reach out to me. I can track Dr. Fisher down for you too. That's absolutely true. Well, we'll put all those links in the show notes, and then I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I think you're one of those folks we could definitely run this back with. I think there's a lot of topics that you could talk about in terms of water in general, and then specifically stormwater. But just for the industry as a whole, any final thoughts, anything that you would like to, say imparting to the audience that, what's going, I don't know, the future of stormwater, just anything that's on your mind, any final thoughts that maybe we didn't get a chance to touch on?
I mean, I would frame it this way as someone I really want the impact is we're at a kind of a point where climate change and climate resilience, like there isn't a runway we're looking at like it is here now. And so certainly we've got to take everything we've learned in the last 30 to 40 years of stormwater, recognize that we've learned a lot of lessons and just not duplicate some of those errors that we've done, and look to some of these things that will ultimately be innovative solutions that will not only work in the regime that was relevant 20 years ago, but the regime that's going to be relevant 20 years from now, where we're going to see a lot more extreme events. We're going to see a lot more sea level rise, because how many times I see somebody in stormwater celebrate that their system can handle 90% of events, and I go, an asphalt can handle 50% of those events. Like a tenth of an inch rainfall event is not a challenge in stormwater. It's when we start seeing those extreme events that you really need a system that works in a world of extreme events. And you need to kind of challenge yourself without necessarily breaking the bank, because yes, can we build a seawall that can resist 10 feet of sea level rise? Yeah, we just built an 11-foot seawall. But if you looked at building an 11-foot seawall, you have to build the entire coast with it. And that's not really an affordable approach to something like that. And so understanding what we got to do, and we're going to have to think differently because the world has changed and how these events come, and certainly challenging folks. So I'm happy to come back on to talk climate change, sustainability, resiliency, embodied carbon. Like, oh my God, like there's just there isn't anything I do halfway. If I know something about it, I will run it to ground. But I appreciate the chance to talk, Ty. This was a lovely conversation. And so hopefully listeners listen to it and enjoy it.
All right. Yes, sir. Thank you again for being on. Appreciate you.